me. If you can take your seats, please take your seats. God, what is it? 122. Oh, you're next. Before we start, Ken Teal from the Solid Waste Recycling Committee wants to make an announcement. Just a short announcement.
Elizabeth Sawyer, 6 Holly Lane, Westford Recycling Commission. We wanted to be communicating the exact dates that we'll have the composter open house at the old highway department on Beacon Street in Graniteville. So there are 4 dates. The first is this upcoming Saturday, June 19th. The other 3 are the last 3 Saturdays in July. So hopefully that gives you an easy way to remember them. Same hours, 9:30 to 11. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And also, the ice cream truck will be here until 3 o'clock. I don't want anybody to leave here to get ice cream unless it's absolutely necessary. Okay. We have a motion under Article 20 to amend the zoning bylaw to allow for home occupations by right. Jeff Morissette will address the motion.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good afternoon.
Sorry, Jeff, before you begin, is there a second? Thank you.
My name is Jeffrey Morissette, and I'm your Director of Land Use Management. I'm here to talk a little bit today about home occupations. So our zoning bylaw defines home occupations as a non-residential accessory use or activity carried on by the permanent resident of a dwelling. So under our current zoning bylaw, special permit approval is required by the Zoning Board of Appeals for most home occupations. A special permit is a discretionary permit in that the board is not obligated to grant the permit, and it does require 4 out of 5 or a supermajority vote. And it's a public hearing process, which takes start to finish about 3 months, and the applicant can expect to spend $1,000 or more on every such application by the time you add up all the costs. And for very minor home occupations, this process and this cost can be a significant disincentive to move forward with the business or an outright barrier. This article proposes to amend the zoning bylaw to allow the less intensive home occupations by right without requiring the special permit public hearing process. And what do we mean by less intensive? Generally speaking, we mean that a casual observer would not be able to tell that a business was being conducted out of the dwelling. So for instance, the only employees working out of the home would be residents that lived in that dwelling. And in general, the business would not generate customer foot traffic going to and from the dwelling. There's one exception to this being proposed by the zoning board based on comments received during their public hearing process. And that is to allow for one-on-one instructional services in the dwelling, such as providing music or art lessons or providing tutoring services. And this would be by right, but it would be limited to not more than 1 pupil at a time. So it's finite, just 1 person. And I'd like to give a quick example about the most common requests that we have received regarding home occupations in the last 5 years or so. And it's about home bakers. So we receive a lot of requests that someone wants to bake bread or cupcakes out of their own kitchen. They want to take those goods and they want to sell them at a local farmer's market or through some other store. Currently, they would need a special permit process from the Zoning Board of Appeals. This amendment would propose that such lesser intensity home occupations could be allowed by right. And just to give you a sense, if that same home baker, if they were to bring in an employee to work out of the dwelling that did not live at the dwelling, that would still require a special permit public hearing process. So it's pretty limited in scope. We hope you think so too. And you may be wondering, why are we bringing this forward now? Well, this was already on our radar before the pandemic hit. But what I will tell you is during the pandemic, there were many people in Westford who found themselves either unemployed, underemployed, or just plain stuck at home. And so we received so many complaints, inquiries over the last year for this, people who are just looking to supplement their income or to see if they could transform a hobby into a successful business venture. And so what I will tell you is, of those inquiries that we received, the vast majority of them did not move forward with that because of costs or other considerations. And so we just think it's time to bring this question to town meeting to see if you will consider this amendment. And from a big picture, this amendment doesn't change what could be permitted as a home occupation. But what it does, it allows for the least intense uses and the most minor of home occupations to be permitted by right, and so to not take that 3-month process and more than $1,000 to get there. We think this is a good idea for residents. We think it's good for business, and we hope that you'll consider supporting this article. The Planning Board concluded their public hearing on this proposed amendment on May 24th, 2021, and they voted 5-0-0 to recommend this article. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions or comments? At the center mic.
Hi, Eileen Tatro. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm at Oak Road. So I have a question looking at 3.4.1.2, number 2. You talked a little bit about this as well, that it says essentially that there's going to be not more than one person not an inhabitant of said dwelling involved if business is being conducted. But when I look at some of these things, especially things like lawyer, accountant, real estate broker, even thinking about things that I might do professionally, I'm thinking about a situation where somebody may be dealing with a couple. And so how does that happen? Does somebody who wants to deal with a couple still have to apply, or are they exempted?
Jeff?
So currently, or actually our current zoning bylaw, if there is a doctor, physician, lawyer, those are already permitted by right in the first section. So this proposal would not affect that. And the section that you're referring to, it's other home occupations allowed by right, those aren't in the residential districts. So those are in the more commercial districts. So that's another difference. I don't know if that helps to answer your question.
Okay, sort of. So does it mean that others that are allowed by right in the residential districts will be able to follow having, a couple come into the house if they need to help advise or counsel or whatever they're doing?
So as this language is presently written, I think that would require a special permit public hearing process.
Okay.
And I will say that the zoning board throughout the years, they've considered many. It's one of the most common applications that they receive. They, by and large, grant the majority of those requests, but they do impose a number of conditions of approval sometimes. So this wouldn't be a no to something like that. It just might mean that they might have to get the same permission as someone would today if the bylaw were not to be amended.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
The microphone to my right.
Yes, hi, Liz Sherry, Collimore Drive. I was just wondering, I'm not aware of what's already in existence with the law on this. I just want to know if this were to pass, how many employees would be allowed at that location, or how many customers could come and go daily?
Jeff?
Thank you. So as of right now, what I can say is this doesn't change what could be permitted as a home occupation. What it does do is if someone is not generating that foot traffic, with the exception of that one-on-one instructional services, all this does, it removes the public hearing process. So this just looks to ease up on the permitting for the least intensive uses. In terms of, there's already some uses that are allowed by right as a home occupation, such as I mentioned the physician, lawyer, architect, engineer, accountant. Those are already permitted by right as long as they meet certain guidelines. So I don't know, does that help to answer your question?
At the center microphone.
Lisa Nakashin, Holsberg, Betty Lane. Thank you, Jeff, for explaining this doesn't change the types of activities allowed, but I do have a question. Would a glass blower be able to open up shop in their garage? And in following that question, depending on the yes or no, if they had, 7,000 PSI of flammable gas to, would that be next to my home potentially?
Well, in order to apply for this, they would have to first make the case to the building commissioner that it does not produce offensive noise, vibrations, smoke, dust, odors, heat, lighting, electrical interference, or other environmental pollution. So the bar would be set that they would have to prove that to the commissioner before reaching an opinion.
Yeah, I think we had that debate in this town years ago, and somehow everything seems to be okay when you make those arguments. So I guess I'm looking for something quantified that says, yes, if we pass this, I know that my neighbor isn't going to have 10,000 PSI of something that might explode in the night.
So what I can tell you, whether or not this passes doesn't change the answer to your question. So that's not what we're looking to change here at all.
Okay, but that's what I'm trying to understand. So would that type of operation be allowed in a home with this passing?
They would have to satisfy all those standards to prove that it would not produce offensive noise or vibrations or other criteria.
Thank you.
Yes.
At the center microphone.
Mike Green, Hidden Valley Road. To the previous comment, I think there are other regulations for storage of hazardous chemicals or materials over a certain quantity that might help to regulate that use. But while I'm in favor of that, Jeff, just a simple question you touched on. What is the enforcement or complaint mechanism for this?
So that's
For these by right, residential.
for by right. So what would happen? First of all, the building commissioner reviews all applications for a home business or license through the town clerk's office. If they feel that the criteria are satisfied, the building commissioner will sign off on it. If he doesn't believe that they comply with the standards, he won't sign off on it and say that they need some permissions from the Zoning Board of Appeals. If, hypothetically, one makes certain claims in their application to get their license and it's found out later on that they are, in fact, producing some nuisance, and we receive complaints, the building commissioner will investigate. He may have the opportunity to make them to cease and desist and compel them to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the public hearing process because he may feel that they do not fit into that standard, that category, that by right category that they put forward. So there is, as with any such thing, a complaint process. And if they can't make good on it and satisfy it there, then it goes to the Zoning Board of Appeals public hearing process.
Seeing no further questions or comments, I'll call for the vote. This is a zoning bylaw change, so it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of the motion under Article 20, please raise your orange cards. Put them down, please. All opposed? The article passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Under Article 21, I have a motion that the town vote to amend sections 2.1.1, 2.1.1, 5.3, 8, 10.2, Appendix A, and Appendix B of the Westford zoning bylaw to allow restaurant drive-through facilities in certain zoning or zoning overlay districts by special permit from the planning board and related changes. Do I have a second to the motion, please? Okay. Bob Schaffer from the planning board.
Hello, I'm Bob Schaffer. I'm a member of the Planning Board, and with me today is Bruce Rosenberg, Chair of the Westford Economic Development Committee. Following the Westford Economic Development Committee meeting in February, the Economic Development Committee requested to the Planning Board through the town manager to reconsider a drive-through restaurant bylaw amendment for the Westford zoning bylaw. This request was in response to questions from several property owners along Littleton Road, or Route 110 as you know it, regarding marketability of certain parcels and for improving business economics in Westford. One owner of a parcel that had a structure designed as a bank with a drive-through has been unsuccessful in finding a bank customer for that location, but they've had multiple inquiries regarding the use as a drive-through restaurant facility. So in March and April, the Planning Board held several public discussions during our meetings regarding this request, and we did agree to endorse Article 21 and to evolve the language and elements for this article, with the result being presented here today in this main motion. We conducted a public 29-day online survey of residents, which closed last Friday on June 4th, and we had 1,695 responses. Of the 1,695 responses, there were just a little over 67% that favored the drive-through restaurant and just under 33% which were opposed. We've held 2 public information forums, and we've also conducted a public hearing on this matter. We've worked with the Economic Development Committee members now for the last 3 months or so to reach out to surrounding communities, business associations, and professionals in the restaurant industry to collect information on restaurant operations and specifically drive-through restaurant operations. So currently, the Westford zoning bylaw permits drive-through or drive-up facilities in all non-residential zoning districts for all commercial uses with the exception of restaurants. At the core of this zoning amendment is the creation of an overlay district that restricts the location for drive-through restaurants to being only those properties along Route 110 Littleton Road within the CH zoning district. And the purpose of this is to try to preserve the character of nearby residential commercial neighborhoods, serve the needs of restaurant customers, and manage traffic impacts as well as safety. The bylaw being presented here today is structured very differently from that bylaw that was presented last fall at the special town meeting in October. The bylaw motion presented here does the following. 1, it defines a drive-through restaurant overlay district, and that is specified through an amended version of Westford's zoning map, and you should have that in the handout with the green cover sheet. And the parcels that are defined in that overlay district were defined by identifying all CH parcels that have frontage along Littleton Road, and that defined the overlay district. We've done it in this manner so that we don't run into issues in the future when there are future A&Rs or future lot line changes. So it's done specifically through a definition on the zoning map. We've also modified the definition of drive-up or drive-through facilities to include a restaurant use, as you see in the main motion. We've added a drive-through restaurant to the definition of a major commercial project, and that's very important because that places all of the requirements and controls that a major commercial project must undertake as a requirement for a drive-through restaurant proposal. And I want to remind you that this requires the issuance of a special permit by the planning board, and please remember, a special permit is a discretionary permit, and it requires a supermajority vote of 4 instead of 3 affirmative votes by the planning board, which is a 5-member board. The bylaw for the drive-through restaurant overlay district also establishes standards for queuing, ordering, payment, and pickup lane design, including on-site capacity with a focus on not permitting overflow onto the public roadway abutting that parcel. It also places signage restrictions through additional amendments to the sign section of the zoning bylaw. It also puts additional restrictions on ordering kiosks, sound, and sound emanations. For restaurants with average wait times in excess of 5 minutes as calculated through an engineering analysis, the ordering and waiting queue design must include special parking for waiting customers that has signs requiring cars with internal combustion engines to be turned off, and to allow for the pull-off of those cars into special parking spaces so they can idle. They will not be idling in line. They will be in special spaces that are signed to restrict idling. There's also additional lighting, landscaping, and screening plans required at the discretion of the planning board for any such modification to a restaurant. Restaurants also must provide for consumption of food both inside and outside. So this would not permit a restaurant kiosk to operate and just have cars drive by, pick up food, and go on. We are trying to encourage eat-in as well as on-premise outside dining. Window service would be limited to not occur outside of the hours of 5:30 a.m. to 10 p.m., and there'd be a limit on the total number of drive-through window restaurants to 6 total within this overlay district. And just for information, the approximate length of the overlay district along Littleton Road is approximately 4 miles. With respect to car idling, this bylaw also establishes strict provisions for requiring parking spaces with no idling signage, as I said before, when the estimated queue time exceeds 5 minutes. We also would be asking for signage to request all participants in that queue, regardless of whether they're over 5 minutes or less than 5 minutes, to please turn off the car whenever possible. And I want to emphasize that this is an additional restriction over what is currently being enacted for curbside pickup, so we think this is an improvement. In addition to the standards requirements that have been specified in the bylaw motion, any drive-through restaurant being considered for a location along Route 110 will be subject to the additional guidance provided by Westford's master plan, as well as the Route 110 master plan.
Bob, I need you to wrap it up. You're beyond your
I'm
6
right there.
minutes. Okay.
The article has been endorsed with unanimous votes by the Westford Economic Development Committee, Westford Commission on Disability, Westford Council of Aging, and Westford Business Association. We did not get a vote of support from the Zoning Board. And lastly, the Planning Board conducted their public hearing this past Monday evening on the 7th of June and voted 5 in favor to recommend this article to town meeting.
Thank you, Bob.
Bruce? Real quick, no, the Economic Development Committee?
To just give a recommendation, that can be with everything else.
Okay. All right.
So questions or comments, in which you can make your recommendation. Center microphone.
Barry Rosenberg, Groton Road. Who will enforce the idling restrictions and the parking regulations? And what does "as possible" mean?
Repeat that. What was the last question?
What does "as possible" mean? To stop idling after 5 minutes and park if possible? I am nervous about the latitude. I'm nervous about enforcement.
So enforcement is not under the purview of the Planning Board and the Permitting Office. That is under the purview of the Select Board and Town Meeting.
Thank you.
The microphone to my left.
I just have a few comments. Diane Hendricks, Crown Road. Number one, I think this is very unfair to our businesses that are already in place. They don't have the ability to automatically become drive-through destinations. And secondly, you know, who is going to enforce this idling? I mean, the Select Board, what, are they going to issue citations? That is an unreasonable burden for the business owners. And as we've seen over the past year, lots of people don't want to pay attention to rules. And I think it's an unfair burden to put on an establishment, something that you can't enforce and you can't expect them to enforce.
At the center microphone.
Hi, Vicki Geary, 51 Carlisle Road. This does put an unfair burden on our existing businesses that are still trying to recover from COVID and the financial losses that COVID brings. These are businesses that have supported Westford and moved into locations that are not conducive to adding a drive-through. So this puts them on an unfair disadvantage. These are businesses who have continued to contribute to Westford through donations, through functions. I am not unsympathetic to the needs of parents and the elderly and the disabled. But what this last year has shown us is that car-side to go, curbside pickup, mobile delivery are all an option for them. And we should be encouraging businesses to promote them more and to embrace them more. We should be encouraging businesses to fill the spaces that are currently sitting empty in all those shopping centers rather than looking at building new structures and creating more traffic. Finally, this bylaw, while it seems narrower in focus, we all know that variances are requested. We all know that we've seen that when things have gone up, like at Cornerstone, they say, oh, the signage doesn't work for us. Can you make an exception to the rule and, you know, give us a bigger sign? So I really don't have a lot of confidence that these are going to be adhered to very strictly. For the impact to our current businesses, for the fact that it doesn't fulfill the need to fill spaces in existing storefronts, and for the impact to our environment even, which I'm sure somebody else will speak on, I encourage you all to vote no on question 21.
And we'll hear from the Economic Development Committee at the front microphone.
I thank you for your comment. One of the key focus points here of the drive-through is that it is, yes, another option. There are curbside pickups, call ahead, whatever it might be. But the key focus of this drive-through was to address accessibility and convenience for several of the stakeholders within the town, stakeholders that either were perhaps elderly, some mobility impaired, immune deficiency, those moms with young kids in the car seats in the back who can't always take them in and out, people that have pets in the car and so on that can't do it. So this is yet another option between dine-in, counter service, telephone, curbside pickup, and so on. An option of convenience and amenity. As to your other point, competition, yes, there's always competition. That's what makes America great. That's what brings out the best. So, you know, we had a discussion today on another article about another alcohol license. Everything brings out competition, provides additional options. Thank you. One other thing that I should mention, a lot of what Bob had captured is in this blue, I don't have my crayon box with me, so I don't know what color you would call this, but it's these blue handouts that were at the front desk, and there are other available. Thank you.
I would call it baby blue. The microphone to my right.
Lynn Cohen, Fletcher Road. I'd like to know if the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee has a recommendation on this article.
Is there somebody here from the Clean Energy and Sustainability? Can you provide? Yep. If you could let him speak at that microphone.
If that's okay. Hi, thanks. Mike Berlinski, Chair of the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee. We did have discussion and vote on this article at our last meeting, and we voted 5-4 against this article. And our main reasons of the concern were global greenhouse gas emissions and local health impacts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. At the center microphone.
Well, hello, good afternoon. I'm Barbara Terrio, 8 Tadmuck Lane. I'm speaking on behalf of Westford Climate Action. It's a group of Westford residents who work on climate issues in town. And here's the story. We voted unanimously against Article 21 because idling at drive-through restaurants increases carbon emissions that make the climate crisis worse. Recently, most of you know that Massachusetts passed a law to reduce carbon emissions to net zero by 2050, so we could continue to live on a healthy planet. And last fall, here at town meeting, we voted overwhelmingly for the climate action resolution to lower Westford's carbon footprint. If we in Westford are to meet the goal of net zero carbon emissions by 2050, then town meeting needs to take action today and all our tomorrows to decrease the CO2 emissions. In fact, unnecessary idling at drive-through restaurants will not decrease CO2 emissions, but increase them, and no idling is insignificant. Now, some will say that cars today don't idle. Well, some don't and emit CO2, but the majority of vehicles do. Those are the ones that would be idling in a drive-through restaurant line, and they would emit CO2 into the air. They would negatively impact Westford's carbon footprint. Now, signs that say no idling will not change people's behavior enough to reduce those carbon emissions. Massachusetts has an anti-idling law, does not exempt drive-throughs. A $100 fine can be levied after 5 minutes of idling. Well, that's not likely to be enforced. Now, customers have several alternatives for food purchases that do not involve idling in a line. And the pets and the children can stay in the car. for curbside pickup or delivery direct to the vehicle. They have online ordering and home delivery. Article 21 is a backward step, no matter how you look at it, and it seems like a great idea. The bottom line is still that greenhouse gas emissions come from idling at drive-through restaurants, and that works against Westford's goal of reducing our carbon footprint. Therefore, voting against Article 21 is the right thing to do for Westford and for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you.
At the microphone to my right.
Yes, David Earl, 8B Old Colony Drive. I'm here to speak in opposition to this. I was involved with the selectmen in the early 80s, and we think we're unanimous at that time as a town and said we did not want drive-ins. And the main driver at the time was traffic and trash, and that hasn't changed. And I think today, through the pandemic, the ability to order food and have it picked up, you could drive to places like Burton's 99, Eva Cucino, and they would bring the goods to your car very quickly, and I think that's the way to go. And my last point is the proponents of this have brought this to the town meeting repeatedly over the years. And I think that is not a fair way to do it. The town makes a judgment, you should live with it. And I don't think you should be, as an economic development committee, advocating for a particular developer in town if he's having trouble renting his property. Thank you.
At the microphone to my left.
Hi, I'm Amy Babcock from 25 Polly Road. I want to support Barbara and the Westford Climate Action. I think we've reached a point right now where we all have to consider very carefully every decision that we make and ask ourselves these questions. I mean, personally and for the town, ask your question, is this going to contribute to the problem? Or is this going to add to the solution? That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. At the center microphone.
Good afternoon, everyone. Eric Barber Mingo, 104 Dunstable Road. I am arguing in support of drive-throughs. Primarily, a seed was planted in my mind in a recent conversation that I had over ice cream and Kimball's, and I thank that friend who planted the seed, and that is this really is centered on accessibility. I can testify that I have been the person with the 3 little kids in the car who can't just jump out and get the food. I have been the person with the recent knee surgery who is stuck in the car and has difficulty getting out to get food. I have been the person whose spouse has been disabled, needing a wheelchair, and at times also afraid of any ice buildup that impedes walking into a restaurant facility. I have been the person with back problems who all of a sudden can't walk, but would rather have the opportunity for the drive-thru. And that's all to say, all of us in our various walks of life have gone through stages where accessibility and just the ability to do what everyone else is doing has become important to them for various reasons. And allowing the drive-through for accessibility reasons is important for all of us for the different stages of life where we find ourselves in difficulty. Furthermore, getting businesses to come to town isn't simply about getting businesses that are operating the drive-throughs. If we want to enhance our business community, we need to be able to state to businesses who are thinking of coming to town that that any worker who's working for that business has every single option to go get food at lunch and to do it quickly and efficiently. And this option that everyone exercises in the town of Chelmsford, in the town of in the town of Ayer, other towns near us where drive-throughs are available, those towns should not have a competitive advantage over Westford in attracting businesses and saying that all of your workers will have all opportunities to get a quick and efficient lunch and go back. So for those reasons, as well as for the fact that if you're going to use a drive-through, you're going to drive to another town. You know, that is going to be as much emissions as sitting there at a drive-through in Westford. So I think it's a little bit of an illusion to say that it has as much of an impact on the environment as everyone is thinking. So for those reasons, I support the proposition. Thank you.
And the microphone to my right.
Rose O'Donnell, 8 Sassafras Road. For many of the reasons stated previously, I'm against this motion, but also because of traffic. I can just imagine signs out on 495 in both directions that say drive-through pizza, exit 32, drive-through donuts, exit 32, drive-through hamburgers, exit 32. And those are not Westford residents. We're not helping the residents of the town, and all it will do is increase the congestion at Minot's Corner and up and down 110.
And the microphone to my right.
Hi, my name is Mark Minucci, Rolling Meadow Lane. I moved to Westford in November of 2019, and one of the very first things I did when I moved here was to join the Westford Conservation Trust. It was a part of my own ethos, and I recognized it as part of the ethos of this community. In February of this year, I started an anti-litter campaign in town, and together with 65 other residents of this community, we have picked up 5,321 pieces of litter, each of them documented. And I want you to ask yourselves when you consider this bill, are we going to be decreasing litter, keeping it the same, or increasing litter in town? And if you're confused about the answer to that question, take a look at the on-ramps and exit ramps on Westford Road and on 110 along Route 3. Just take a look. I can tell you today, when we pick up litter in town, again, 5,321 pieces of litter in the last 3 months alone. It is nips, it is beer cans, and it is bottles, it is cigarettes, it is vaping equipment. Imagine what the nature of the litter will look like when we introduce drive-throughs. And you don't have to imagine too hard. Again, you can see it'll be Burger King and McDonald's, it'll be Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks. These will be adding to our community. And we've talked about the impact on the environment of idling. Consider the impact on our environment when waste enters our streams, in our forests, in the digestive tracts of our animals. These are very clear perils that happens when we introduce drive-throughs into our town. There are many options for our disabled and elderly residents already. In fact, there's new exciting business opportunities, things like Hello Fresh and Blue Apron. There's pickup at curbside. So there is no deficiency of options here. And lastly, I want to say one of the gentlemen speaking at the front, I believe from the Economics Council, correctly labeled this as an opportunity of convenience and amenity. Our planet is past the point of the luxury of convenience and amenity, and we must say no to this. Thank you.
At the center microphone.
Carol Morse, 2 Wagon Trail Road. At last year's town meeting, this body passed a resolution to take action to promote clean energy and to reduce fossil fuel use to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. We need to stand by our commitment. We need to continue unimpeded the path we have begun to a cleaner, healthier future for our children and for the planet. I urge you to oppose this article.
And the microphone to my right.
Erica Cole, 4 Francis Hill Road. I wanted to point out that 20.
We can hear you.
Okay. 23 states and a growing number of cities are imposing bans on drive-throughs or limiting drive-throughs, including a bunch of cities that already have drive-throughs and are now implementing restrictions on those drive-throughs. NPR did an article on them and discovered that most bans focus on curbing emissions, reducing litter, improving pedestrian safety, and enhancing walkability. We would be potentially having to go backwards if we don't, if we avoid approving this particular article. I'd like to address the concerns about accessibility. The people who are most likely to need accessibility may well be vulnerable to what I discovered as one of the major reasons that that cities and towns are putting restrictions on the drive-throughs, and that is that the particulates and the noxious gases associated with tailpipes are particularly health impacting for young children, for instance, who have high metabolisms and small lungs and are at particular vulnerability to impacts of that. This is rather distracting. As well as people who have and that sort of thing. So that it may be more convenient for them, but it may adversely affect their health. I don't see a need to go backwards on that either. One last thing regarding emissions. The U.S. Department of Energy says that personal vehicles generate around 30 million tons of CO2 every year just by idling. For saving fuel and reducing emissions, eliminating the unnecessary idling of personal vehicles will be the same as taking 5 million off the road. So for these reasons, I am against this article. Thank you.
And the microphone to my right.
Marion Harmon, Old Colony Drive. To this article for many reasons, but one of the big ones is traffic. That is the reason that we have voted this down, I think, four additional times in the past. The traffic, that most of the towns along 495 near us, including Acton and Groton and Littleton, do not allow drive-throughs. So we would be, you know, the oasis for those people that are looking for a drive-through, and we would be a magnet for them. So we would get a lot more traffic in town, and I know nobody enjoys the nuisance of traffic there at the Four Corners. In addition, additional traffic brings us even more air pollution because traffic is idling. We're idling in traffic, waiting for that light. So for both those reasons, traffic and to clean our air, or at least not make it any worse than it is, I oppose it. Thank you.
I'm going to take two more people at each microphone. So let's start over there, to my right.
So I don't know if I can do this now. Eileen Tatro, my pronouns are she, her. Oak Road, and I'd like to move to call the question.
You can do that. We have a motion to end debate and move the question. Is there a second? Okay. This requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of terminating debate and moving the question, please raise your orange cards. Please raise them high so I can see them. Okay, put them down, please. All opposed? The motion passes with a 2/3 majority. So we have now ended debate, and we're going to be voting on the main motion. If you vote yes, you'll be voting in favor of the motion to change our bylaw to allow drive-through restaurants. If you vote no, you'll be voting against that. This motion, as a change to the zoning bylaws, also requires a 2/3 majority. Those in favor of the motion to amend our bylaw to allow drive-through restaurants, raise your orange cards. Put them down, please. Those opposed? The motion fails. It does not achieve a 2/3 majority. Yeah, thank you. We voted. We don't need to do anything else. Okay. Article 22 is a citizen's petition requesting that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaws to ensure that the town honors the vote of town meeting for at least 2 years, as shown in the redlined original text below, by removing language that allows for the planning board to propose a change within those 2 years. The presentation will be by the petitioner, Chauncey Chu.
Good afternoon. I'm Chauncey Chu of Green Needles Road. Thank you. As your original copy of the warrant says, come on down to the town meeting and make your voice heard. Our town meeting is the last pure example of direct democracy. To ensure your vote is heard and stands, one of the zoning bylaws, section 9.5.1, reinforces this value by clearly stating, and let me read it as stated in the warrant. It's quick, it'll be quick. 9.5.1 amendments. No proposed change to this zoning bylaw, which has been unfavorably acted upon by the town meeting, shall be considered by the town meeting within 2 years of the town meeting. Shall be considered by the town meeting, unless adoption of the proposed change has been recommended in the final report of the planning board to the town meeting. This is modeled directly from Mass Law, Chapter 40A, Section 5. And you'll see why I reference that. This article will delete the last phrase of this one sentence, as shown in your warrant. Of course, the planning board objects. They say if there's a change in the facts, they want to be able to present their amendment again. I'm going to cite 2 court cases that gives the planning board just such an opportunity. Kitty versus Springfield back in 1961, and Penn versus the town of Barnstable in 2019. Both cases said the town council could revisit a zoning amendment within the 2-year period. However, the Penn case was appealed and went to the Mass Appeals Court, which broadly construed this statute. Here the court ruled that the second look is, and I quote, fundamentally and essentially the same as the defeated bylaw. The proposed bylaw cannot be enacted within 2 years of being rejected by the municipal body. This article will eliminate the ambiguity in this bylaw by removing the planning board's ability to propose the same amendment and eliminate their argument that their second look is not fundamentally and essentially the same. This simply means that any zoning bylaw that is defeated by town meeting, your vote will stand for at least 2 years. This will provide the planning board ample time to do their outreach and hold multiple public hearings to build their case for their second try. Let your vote stand for the 2 years, regardless of some poll or survey. Please consider a vote to support this article. Thank you.
I don't believe I called for a second. Can I have a second for this motion? Thank you. All right, questions or comments? George?
George Murray, 14 Haywood Road.
Oh, sorry, George. Before you go forward, Mike, could you give the planning board recommendation?
Thank you, Madam.
My apologies, George.
Good afternoon, Michael Bonifant, Vice Chair of the Planning Board. On May 24, 2021, the Planning Board concluded the public hearing on the proposed amendment and voted 5-0-0 not to recommend this to article to town meeting. Thank you.
Now, George.
Thank you. We had quite a lot of discussion about the resolution that you passed earlier today, recommending to a future town meeting to please consider the position that we had taken on funding of the affordable housing project. My question is really one for town council. Can this town meeting impose behavior on a future town meeting? And I think the answer we got loud and clear was no, they can't. And my opinion is that
if next year's town meeting wants to do something different than we did at this year's town meeting, that's up to the voters who show up at town meeting next year. Thank you.
Well, let's have town council answer your question as well, even though you've already rendered your opinion, George.
Madam Moderator, through you to the previous speaker, we were asked to look at this proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and in our considered judgment, it is legally flawed. And even if town meeting were inclined to approve it, it is likely that the Attorney General would disapprove the bylaw. And the reason for this is that the language that this petition seeks to strike out of your bylaw is actually a provision of state law. Now, let me give you an example. On the previous vote on drive-throughs, that was considered less than 2 years ago by town meeting, but state law says it can be considered in a period shorter than 2 years if there is a positive planning board recommendation. And there was. And that's why it was before you, and it was consistent with state law. This amendment purports to take away the ability of town meeting to consider the same amendment within 2 years, regardless of whether the planning board is recommending it. So this is a legally flawed article, in my opinion.
Thank you. At the microphone to my left, Dennis.
Dennis Galvin, 90 Concord Road, former member of the planning board. And despite what the town council says, there's some information on this that I think is important to share. I would support Mr. Chu's resolution. The 2-year zoning restriction, or the 2-year moratorium on zoning activity from a town meeting, has been a long Massachusetts, and the purpose of that to protect your property. Rather than having somebody come back repeatedly. Good case in point would be something like the asphalt plant. So law has changed law that essentially are crushing local authority and local self rule with regards to being able to plan local planning and local zoning in the communities. And I think Mr. Chu's resolution, at the very least, whether it be flawed or not, is a very good signal to the state of Massachusetts that we are going to resist this, and we do not accept it here in Westford. Thank you.
Town Council John Giorgio.
Madam Moderator, I'm not exactly sure what the previous speaker was referring to, but this provision in the general laws has been there for, I believe, as long as I've been practicing in Massachusetts. It's a long-standing provision. It is a requirement of state law, and while town meeting may enact a provision that is less restrictive than state law, it cannot enact a provision that is more than restrictive. And the problem that's going to come up if you vote for this, then the question is town council supposed to argue this, even though it's contrary to state law, when it goes to the Attorney General? I don't think that's a particularly good use of your legal resources when this is a very clear question. If anyone here thinks this is bad public policy at the state level, then you should be lobbying for an amendment to the Zoning Enabling Act, not your zoning bylaw.
At the center microphone.
Mike Green, Hidden Valley Road, also a former member of the planning board. And I appreciate the spirit of the article. I'm opposed to it. And I think, we saw in this meeting the opportunity, if a bylaw isn't right or gets feedback here, or send it back, to the board for further work and effort, this prevents the opportunity for that to come back as a better bylaw for 2 years. And involved in zoning for a number of years. 2 years is a long time for developments and development potential. So I certainly appreciate the spirit of the bylaw, but I'm opposed to it.
Okay, seeing no other comments or questions, I'll call for the vote. Again, this requires a 2/3 majority. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your orange cards. Put them down, please. All those opposed, the motion fails. Thank you, Chauncey. Okay, here we are at Article 23, and I haven't seen anybody go out for ice cream. So proud of you. Oh, the truck left? Okay. Under Article 23, this is a citizen's petition to amend the zoning bylaw to expand the zoning overlay for senior residential multifamily overlay districts. Is there a second? The article will be presented by Melissa Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Before I begin, I would like to make a motion to allow two non-residents to speak on the next article, namely Katie Enright and Scott Clark, who are non-residents and non-voters.
The article's been made, the motion's been made and seconded to have two non-residents speak. This requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor, please raise your orange cards. Put them down, please. All opposed? That passes unanimously. Melissa?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good afternoon. I'm here today to see if the town will vote to amend the bylaw by adding the parcels to be included in the Senior Residential Multifamily Overlay District. These parcels are commonly known as Merrill's Quarry. Approving this overlay will not approve a development. It merely gives the right to seek approvals for a senior multifamily development for seniors 55 and over, similar to the development at Stone Ridge. Stone Ridge was developed to address a shortage of senior housing in Westford. Placing the overlay on the Merrill Quarry will also help to address the continued shortage of senior housing in Westford. For those of you not familiar with the site, it's located on the Westford and Tingsboro line as in approximately 43 acres in size. The site abuts Greystone Estates, the Rita Miller School, residential properties in Tingsboro, and is across the street from Stone Ridge Development. There is a significant quarry hole in the center of the site. The site is not currently in use and is predominantly used by trespassers to swim. This has actually been an ongoing safety issue for years, with people getting injured and unfortunately some deaths. The site is zoned industrial and was previously used for quarrying and rock processing. Since it is an industrial zoning district, most of the uses allowed by right are commercial and industrial, such as business, printing establishments, general service establishments, removal of sand and gravel, quarrying and mining, light manufacturing, and wholesale trade. Those are the uses allowed by right. Although the town has grown around these uses on the site, the industrial uses are really no longer compatible with the surrounding uses, which are largely residential. Allowing for the overlay would allow for a senior housing development, which would be better suited for this area now. Approval of the overlay does not approve the plan in your packet. That plan is just there so you can see a conceptual plan. Approvals would still be required from the Town of Westford Conservation Commission, Planning Board, and other local and state boards and departments. A real design would be completed once a project is applied for if this overlay was to be allowed. I'd like to just give a little detail on the site plan you have included in your zoning packet, and to do so, I'll turn over to Katie Enright from Howard Stein Hudson, who's the engineer who prepared the plan.
Good afternoon, everyone. The plan in your packet was created as required as part of the overlay article review by the Planning Board. The proposal commits to the creation of an over 55 community with water views of the quarry, protection of wetland resources, open space, pedestrian connectivity, parks and trails to be of use by the homeowners within the development and also the public. The existing senior overlay could allow for a density of 1 bedroom per 8,000 square feet or 2 dwelling units per acre. The plan that we have provided shows a maximum density of 95 senior units. The project would be required to maintain a 100-foot vegetated buffer at the perimeter of the property with discretion by the Planning Board for both roadways and access ways. As part of the proposal, the team was directed by the existing zoning article to review and understand the site, evaluate the site's context, and designate development and open space areas. The team has reviewed the existing plans and have completed multiple site walks of the property, noting specifically areas of rock removal, cleared areas, stockpiling of rock excavations, the quarry hole, cart paths and trails that lead to these areas from the abutting residential areas, and also the Rita Miller School. Regarding the site context, we have access off of Tingsboro Road in Westford and the abundance of previously mentioned site features. We then prepared the conceptual development plan that celebrates the quarry hole, taking into account the many unique properties of the site. In reviewing the areas for open space, we noted the current public use of trails, the popularity of the quarry hole, the mapped wetland resource areas, and its adjacency to the Conservation Commission land off of Caldwell Road. The project intends to use the quarry hole as its centerpiece. The development intends to protect wetland resource areas and provide connectivity to the parcel owned by the Conservation Commission off Caldwell Road for additional protected buffers and continuity of the open space. Development areas are dictated by offsets already required within the bylaw, natural site features, local wetland bylaws, man-made site features, and the historic uses that existed on the site. The project intends to adhere to these offsets, reuse existing cart paths, adhere to locally required wetland requirements, and connect to open space for both passive and structured use, including a potential playing field to be associated with the Rita Miller School.
Since the time of the submittal of the warrant article, we've had numerous public hearings and have met with the residential abutters on the site. Although we can't make detailed commitments at this point, as we do not know the details of the site or the proposed development, you can see on the plan in your handouts that the applicant has already made commitments as a result of these discussions with the abutters and as part of the planning board process. Given my limited time, which I know is almost up, I will not go through these in detail, but they are there listed for your review, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. As part of this, we would also like to make an overlay map that shows the location of this overlay, not just for this site if it is approved, but also the existing sites. All other overlays in town already have one of these maps, so this would help show where the maps are in the plan. Madam Moderator, at this point, I'd like to make a motion to include those two items, that any motion under this article include the following language: to include the detailed commitments as shown on the plan, and to amend the town's zoning map to depict the senior residential multifamily overlay district as amended.
Do you have that written down for me somewhere? So there's been a motion made to amend. Okay. So there's been a motion made to amend the existing motion to add a request that an overlay map be created, adding this to the existing zoning that allows for this. Is there a second for that? Is there a second to that motion to amend? Oh, sorry. Okay. Any discussion or questions about the motion to amend? Bill Harmon at the center mic.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Bill Harmon, Old Colony Drive. I'm interested in the issue of housing density, and I think I'm not quite sure I understand this amendment. So my question is, does it bring the area of the subject of density into the town meeting vote today, which I think was not originally in it?
No, we don't have a density at this time. The density will be in conformance with the bylaw. So this is just a conceptual plan. The way the overlay works, and I know the town council is here, so I won't speak as town council, but the overlay is based on a conceptual plan, and then if approved, you have to go forward and get all the approvals, and that's when the discussion of density would go through. The plan you have in your packet shows the highest and best use for the site, which is the by right density in the senior residential multi-family overlay district by right.
I'm going to ask Jeff, can you answer that question? Also, I think the question is whether, if you're adding it to the existing zoning overlay district, does it change the density?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So the request to amend our zoning bylaw map was actually based on a planning board recommendation through the public hearing process as advised by town council and recent amendments that we put forth to the Attorney General's office. So the applicant was actually good enough to include that in their motion. So all we are asking them to do is to graphically show what is already in the overlay, because it hasn't been shown on our zoning map before, and if this passes, to then show what is being added, if it is so added. So we're just looking to graphically clarify what's actually in the district. And in terms of density, our zoning bylaw provides an allowable maximum density of units. I believe it's 2 units per acre. And so they are proposing something to be simply consistent with the bylaw. It is certainly possible through the course of planning board review and others that density could ultimately be reduced based upon review in the public hearing process.
I think I understand.
Do you have a follow-up, Bill?
Well, yes, I'll put it this way. I believe the original motion as written involves density because to pass this would mean that the density could be much higher than it would be. This is a buildable area right now. And so I think the answer is that this amendment does not change that issue. That's my understanding.
At the center microphone.
At the risk of looking really stupid, what's an overlay?
Oh, Jeff, I think that's a question for you. There's no stupid question.
So a zoning overlay district is a district that sits on top of or over the base underlying zoning district. And in an overlay district, it can either allow for additional things to happen, or it can be more restrictive and prevent some things from happening.
Okay, are you speaking to the amendment?
Yeah, no.
Okay. Are there any more comments to the amendment?
Yeah. I want to be 100% sure I understood what the amendment was.
Okay.
Could someone explain it again?
There's actually 2 parts of the amendment. One is to actually create a map similar to other overlay maps in the town of Westford that actually shows where the senior residential multifamily overlay district is located. Right now, that map would just include the project across the street from the site, and then if this is approved, it would show this site. So it would just add one map to the zoning book itself.
So is it one of the maps that have been presented here or not?
No.
Some
It would just be
conceptual
to
map.
graphically show the parcels.
Okay. And
Similar
then
to the Water Resource Protection Overlay District, it would just show it as a colored parcel, so you could easily see it on an assessor parcel.
What was the second part?
The second part was to include the commitments as shown on the plan that are shown as points as part of this warrant article.
Could someone read those commitments? I want to make sure I'm looking at the right list. I don't know what those commitments are.
Yes, give me a moment. Let me just make sure I have it on. I'm going to read them. So they're the ones shown on this plan graphically as points. Okay?
There's 3 boxes here, the address, and then there's bullets to the right and ABCD down below.
All of those points would be included.
Okay. And Madam Moderator, do we here have the opportunity to say, sure, we'd like to pass this if the affordable housing were maybe 18% instead of 15%?
So first of all, right now, we're only speaking to the amendment.
Well, that's strictly about the amendment.
The amendment is to create a map and add certain requirements that the applicant's already committed to the article.
Right. That's exactly what I'm speaking to. Those items right here about how much affordable housing will be part of the project, the commitments that have been stated on this page.
Okay. Well, if you disagree with those...
No, I don't disagree.
Do you want to make an amendment?
I'm asking a question.
Okay. And the question is?
If this amendment can be made, and these commitments are now part of what we can debate here at town meeting floor, then are we allowed to say, instead of 15% being affordable units, we'll approve this if it's actually 18%?
You can make an amendment at that time.
Very good. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion of the amendment? Okay. Town Council. Okay, that was just making sure I knew what I was doing. frightening. Okay, so all in favor of amending the article as proposed, please raise your orange voter cards. Put them down, please. Opposed? That is unanimous. So the amendment passes, and we're now voting on the motion as amended. Comments or questions? At the center, okay. Somebody approach the mic.
I'm Bill Harmon. I have a comment about this. My main interest in this is because I'm familiar with this land, and it's mostly forested right now. And I'm interested in forests and trees because in the dealing with the climate catastrophe that we're worried about, trees are very important. And so that interests me a lot, and I would prefer an ordinary subdivision. I believe this land is developable, and in the ordinary way, it would be an open space residential subdivision and would have a lot of that woods preserved and not removed and changed into housing. So that's my comment.
And the microphone to the right. Hi, Liz Sherry, 10 Collimore Drive. Can someone define for me what multifamily means?
Jeff, do you want to did you hear the question?
Thank you. So our zoning bylaw defines multifamily development as a building or buildings containing 2 or more attached dwelling units or more than 1 dwelling unit, whether or not attached, on a single lot, and the buildings accessory thereto. So if you have more than 1 dwelling unit on a lot, or if you have attached multiple units, that would be considered multifamily development.
Thank you. So in regards to this, so I can understand that what I'm reading is what will be only senior citizens will be allowed to live here. In the other article, we heard senior citizens were 62 and older. Now this is saying senior 55 and older.
Sure, I can clarify. This is by definition in your bylaw. The town of Westford defines senior as 55 and over. The earlier Warren article was under a state regulation that requires 62 and over, so it is different. This is for 55 and over. And just, Madam Moderator, if I can, to the last point, Mr. Morissette was correct about the multifamily definition, but the senior residential multifamily overlay district also limits the amount of units you can have in a structure to 5. So you can't have more than 5.
Okay, and the affordability, will that be for only Westford residents?
The affordability is set by the bylaw, the senior residential bylaw, and I'm going to start calling it the senior mod so I don't have to say it over and over again for everybody. But what it does is it limits 5% to truly affordable, 5% to moderate, and then 5% to 100% of the area median income. The 2 first ones, the moderate and the low, those both get counted on the town of Westford's housing inventory. And much like the other housing, there'll be a lottery, and there can be a local preference for Westford residents up to 70% that could go into that pool. And then anybody that doesn't make it in the first round can go into the second pool.
So up to 70%, not 70%.
I think it is 70%. You can have no more than 70%, I'm sorry.
Okay. And who is going to try to own this? Who's the buyer?
They would be individual buyers. These would be units that could be...
No, I mean, who's buying the property to develop it?
Right now, Clark Development has it under agreement, and that's Mr. Scott Clark, who's here with me today. And the conceptual plan you have in your packet was prepared by them.
And at the microphone to my left.
Christina Green, Chesapeake Drive. I'd like to get a little more clarification on the age restriction for a senior mod. Does that mean that everybody living there needs to be 55 and over?
No, at least one owner occupant must be 55 and over. So
Okay.
not everybody in these units has to be 55 and over.
So there could be school-age children living there?
That's correct.
I had a second question. For the senior mod, is there anything in there that explains who's going to be responsible for trash, recycling, and the roads?
Not specifically, no.
So it would be up to who to decide that?
That would be part of the planning board process.
Okay, thank you.
Mike?
Mike Green, Hidden Valley Road. If you can clarify the unit density, did you use the 1 bedroom per 8,000 square feet or 2 units per acre?
I'll let Katie Enright speak to that.
And again, have you maximized density for the site in this plan?
That's correct. So the bylaw constitutes an acre as 40,000 square feet, so it redefines the acre as a 40,000 square foot per acre. And so with that, the calculation comes to be 2 units per acre, the acre being calculated to be about 47 and a half acres at 40,000 square feet to get to 95.
Okay. And this plan is maximum density then?
This is maximum density. That is correct.
If I could, Madam Moderator, 2 other quick questions. When Stonebridge came in, I was in a butter Stonebridge, and they came to town meeting with actually an executed development agreement with the proposal, and it went quite smoothly, looked at additional buffer spaces and so forth. Many of these provisions that you have on the plan are required by the bylaw, the 100-foot buffer, the 10% plus 5% affordable and so forth, which is all well and good. But can you comment a little more specifically on your discussions with the abutters?
Sure, we've had 2 meetings with the abutters. One that was a general meeting just to answer some questions and listen to some concerns. And the second was a meeting that was also attended by Main Drilling and Blasting that also spoke about what blasting is and what it would be like and what type of the general blasting processes are.
And if I could ask one last question, Madam Moderator, this abuts a parcel that I believe is also open in Tingsboro.
That's correct.
And if you could comment for the meeting, there is no intention to access that parcel through this development?
That's correct. At this point, where the senior residential overlay would just be in Westford. We have no future plans right now for Tingsboro land.
At the microphone to my right. Are you waiting to speak?
Yes, sorry. Hi, Eileen Tatro. My pronouns are she, her, Oak Road. And I have a question. So you mentioned the quarry and the concerns, the liabilities associated with it, which I know we've definitely had problems with in the past. Who will have ownership of that quarry and that space, that place where people go diving or whatever, and making sure that there's no, deaths or accidents or taking the liability for that?
The condo association that owns the property would be responsible.
Thank you.
And to my left.
Kate Hollister, 25 Unbrook Road. I'm also a member of the planning board. And the planning board did vote on this, and the vote was 4-1 against and 0 abstained. And I was the person who was opposed. And I just wanted to state my reason why I voted no against this. In general, I support it. It's nice to have senior housing. It is a beautiful place. And what they've proposed they've proposed within the bylaw. But there were it's not a completely thought out plan because they still have a lot of engineering work to do. And my issue was mainly the affordability, and affordability that you see here relates only to that 10% that is within the state housing inventory affordability that they have agreed that they will make the effort to make sure that that 10% gets in the state's housing stock and is counted towards our 10% in the town for affordable percentage. But then I asked about the other 85% of this proposal and what the relative affordability of that would be. They had mentioned how the unit sizes would be between 1,600 square feet and 2,500 square feet, and a mix of 2-bedroom and 10%, which is the maximum allowable for 3-bedroom units. And so I asked, well, what would an expected distribution be of the unit sizes? So I was interested. Are the majority of them going to be less than 2,000 square feet? Are the majority of them going to be greater than 2,000 square feet? And the applicant was not, or the proponent was not able to give an answer because they have not done enough work on the area to know what the ledge issues are, what the wetland issues are, how many houses they can actually put in here.
I also asked about the housing prices, because if you think about what we've had in town in the last 2 years, we've had these 2 40B developments, and we've had, well, we've had 3, but I'm only considering the 2 big ones, plus we've had a couple of condo unit developments that have come into town, and all of them, the market rate units have been advertised as luxury units. And my concern is for the average senior citizen in the town. It's nice having luxury. I appreciate they have the right to do luxury, but I also want to help out the average person in town who wants to sell the house they've been living in for a long time, and they want to move into something that's less pricey and maybe smaller. But people have been complaining that because everything is being marketed now as luxury, they can't afford to stay in Westford. So I asked, well, what would the housing prices be in here? Would you be willing to commit that of the 85% that are going to be market rate, that they will not all be marketed as luxury? And they would not make that commitment. And so because they would not make a commitment to have a broad range of housing prices, I voted against it. Thank you.
At the center microphone, Diane.
Diane Wood, 122 Depot. I echo many of the items that Kate just mentioned. And I had asked this question in one of the other presentations that was made. We're talking about density and the proposal of 95 units. However, at one of the meetings I attended, those numbers were not yet baked. And the presenter suggested that that number could be as low as 45 up to 95. And when I did the math on the affordable end of things, we're talking 10% of what, 45, 55 units. So we're doing all of this and incorporating luxury over 55 development for 5 units. That last 5% is market rate of Westford, which median right now is $147,000. And some of us tend to include, I hear presentations including that as affordable. I don't know when $147,000 was mixed in a category of truly affordable housing. So is there a range? Do we know now what the low-end range of number of units would be, therefore being able to fine-tune what the affordable units we're really going to get out of this? Thank you.
Melissa. Madam Moderator, just 2 points on the affordability issue. We're not seeking any sort of relief as to the affordability issue. This is a 100% conformance with the bylaw. And even more than that, the second 5% doesn't say it has to be counted on your housing inventory, but we've already committed to that. So when you speak to the affordable numbers, I just want to make sure that it's clear that what we're asking for is a fully conforming project. We're not asking for any concessions on the level of affordability out there. As to the number of units, that won't be dictated until a final site plan is done. Site testing still has to be done. We still have to do the resource area delineation, showing the limit of the wetlands. I think somebody already pointed out that we also have to test for ledge. These are all things that still need to be done, but will not be done unless the overlay is in place. Quite simply, you're just not going to do the work and develop a plan if the overlay is not going to be approved. So if the overlay is approved, the testing will be done, and then we would determine how many units we could get on the site, and then would be able to determine the amount of affordability and the amount of affordable units.
Hand the microphone to my left.
Marion Harmon, Old Colony Drive. We figure that at maximum build-out, the plan shows that the density is double what Stone Ridge has. So that's very high. And given that, if that is what actually happened, it seems to me that they definitely could increase the number of affordable units from what they're proposing.
Madam Moderator, can I respond?
I don't think she asked a question.
Okay.
At the center microphone.
I'm Mark Benucci, 6 Rolling Meadow Drive. I wanted to bring up a point that Bill Harmon brought up. I've had the privilege of talking to the Westford Food Pantry president, so I'm very sensitive to the idea that our seniors might be going hungry, and the idea that they might be homeless or struggling for housing is something that's really difficult for me to digest. So I do support this. I'd like to ask the developer if there's a potential to address Bill Harmon's comment of adding a new bullet item. So this would be an amendment. New bullet item E in the box that we've added here, a commitment to replant any equal to or greater than the amount of trees that were removed from the property. So I am very familiar with this property. It's about a half mile from my house. I'd like to see, we have some very good commitments here about affordability and commitment to town concerns. I'd like to see an explicit entry about planting trees, minimum one or more per tree removed. Is that something that the Clark Development, Property Development would be willing to speak to and potentially add as a line item?
Are you just asking a question or making an amendment?
I'd like to make an amendment. If this is not explicitly covered in, quote, town concerns, it says a commitment to, quote, town concerns. So my question is replanting trees a part of town concerns? If the answer is no, that's not express, yes, I would like to make an amendment.
All right, let's answer the question first then.
Yes, there is a commitment for open space, and there's also a commitment of the 100-foot buffer along the property line. And I just want to make sure that it's clear to the town meeting that can be, some portions of that 100-foot buffer can be waived by the planning board for access roads and the like. So you can see, even on this plan, there is some areas that are within that 100-foot buffer. There is no commitment to take down a tree and put up a tree, largely because we don't know how many trees are going to be taken down. Some of the area that's largely treed is along the back of the Rita Miller School, whereas you can see from the plan, we're proposing to put a playing field back there. Yep. So at this point, there's no commitment as to trees or number of trees to be removed. That would all be reviewed as part of the site plan review process with the planning board.
So then, yes, I would like to make a formal proposal, a formal amendment to add item E to the waiver, to the additions that we just made a few moments ago. That says an express commitment to the environment, particularly planting one or more trees for those trees that are removed from the property. It does not have to be on that property, but a commitment to that.
Okay, can you get that to us in writing? And is there a second?
If you have a pen.
I can give you a pen. All right, so now we're discussing the amendment about tree planting. Are there any questions or comments specifically?
Just a point of clarification, I'd like a definition of what a tree is. Because they're talking about the caliper of a bush, or I just would like a definition put into the motion, please.
Yeah.
So I am not a botanist, I'm an engineer, so I won't overstep my education level. But I do want to say there are CO2 removing properties from trees. I'm certain that there's going to be a site survey done as part of this formal plan, whatever the formal plan turns out to be. I would ask that as part of that formal plan, then, we're evaluating the nature of the trees. I don't know tree for tree what's on that property today, so it's about CO2 removal. I don't have a.
So I think we need it specified in the amendment what your, is the amendment proposing that you request the request that the developer provide a tree for tree?
Do you want to take the question?
Sure. Okay. While he's getting that in order, we're not talking to the amendment yet because we don't really have what it is. So let's go on with if there are any other questions relative to the underlying motion. Erica?
Erica Cole, 4 Francis Hill Road. Now, I had a comment on the amendment, but just a point on the sequestration. I have walked in those woods back there. They're delightful. There are trails. It's very pretty. And just a point on carbon sequestration. I love the idea of planting new trees, but there is nothing like old trees to sequester carbon. New trees aren't going to do anything close to the amount of old trees. It'll take about 40 years or so before they're really good at it. So just as a point of information. But regarding the original item, I am concerned about that, but I'm also interested in just the process that this got to us by. I note that this is something that was brought forward by a citizen petition as opposed to something that was brought to us by the planning board. I don't know what is expected by our bylaws, so perhaps this is a legal question, but it does seem strange to me that it would come to us this way. That's one question, and then the other question is regarding...
Let's answer one question at a time.
So this is the... Madam Moderator?
Yeah.
This is the procedure put forth in the zoning bylaw, that a conceptual plan is put on through the warrant, and then the plan is reviewed by the planning board for comment, and then it comes to town meeting to put an overlay in place based on the conceptual plan. We've included the conditions that were suggested in a 4-to-1 vote by the planning board. That's all set out in the procedure under the zoning bylaw, so we're following the procedure.
Thank you for that.
Did you have another question, Erica?
Yeah, just wondering what the select board also voted 4-to-1, and I'm just wondering what the opposed perspective was.
Somebody want to give the opposing opinion from the select board? It's easy.
Hi, my name is Anita Tonakarn-Wynn. I was that opposing vote. So I guess my perspective is kind of a bigger one, where I think about, I definitely respect the authority of the planning board and their perspective. I know that the developers and the proposers were following everything legally, right? But I think about the select board perspective complementing the planning board, thinking about all the members of our community and accessibility. And I don't think that, although this proposed senior housing development is for 55 and over, it's not financially accessible to our older adults in town. And I think we hear a lot about people being worried about getting outplaced, basically. They're not able to afford where they live here after spending decades here of dedicating their time. And I just worry that we're still going to have this continued issue of housing that's affordable for our older adults. Thank you.
Okay, we have an amendment. Stay here in case I can't read your handwriting. Which asks for a commitment to planting a number of native trees in an amount equivalent to or greater than the number of trees removed from the property. Did I get it? All right, let's get a second on that. I know we seconded it. Is there a second? Okay. Point of order, George, what is it?
Madam Moderator, the article deals with an overlay bylaw. We're into a site review for a project that hasn't even been formally proposed yet. I remember when we were building schools, we'd have a conceptual drawing and people would want to know, how many chalkboards are you going to have in each classroom? This is the purview of the planning board and their process, which extends over months to get everybody's input, every citizen's concerns. I don't believe that town meeting floor is the place for this discussion.
The remedy for that would be to vote against the amendment, and the reason I say that is we have already included these requirements by passing the earlier amendment, and this is basically just an amendment to that. So I'm going to accept the amendment if there is a second, which I think we got already, and I think we need to vote on it because of what we included in here as additional commitments to abutter and town concerns as part of our motion.
I think they were also out of order.
Too late for that, George. We already voted on that one.
Could we get an opinion from town council as to whether this is an appropriate discussion to have when we're talking about an overlay?
Sorry for that delay. I just wanted to verify that I understood. So the developer commitments that were part of the First Amendment is town meeting's direction to the developer that when they submit the concept plan to the planning board, it has to include all those provisions. And if it doesn't, then presumably the planning board is going to require them to include those provisions because that's the commitment they made here at town meeting. And if they don't include them, then that would be grounds for denial of the concept plan. But that's going to be something for the planning board. So, in my opinion, adding an amendment on the tree replacement requirement is consistent with the prior vote under the First Amendment and is an appropriate subject for town meeting to vote on through an amendment.
Any further discussion or questions on the amendment? Microphone to my left.
Hi, thank you, Madam Moderator. Sue Thomas, Old Homestead. I'd like to make a motion to amend the amendment, and I apologize, but there's a lot of new information about carbon sequestration, and as Erica mentioned, replacement planting is not going to get us to where we want to be for net zero in 2050, which is what this body in October made a resolution to try to do. So my recommendation would be that the amendment state that all native trees, healthy trees, be preserved over the age of 50 to 60 years, wherever possible, anywhere on the property. So it affects the site plan in terms of a factor that is considered in how they place housing on that property.
So let me just get an opinion from town council, and then I'll get back to you. 1 second.
Thank you.
So an amendment to an amendment is both complicated to follow and frowned on. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you would, is hold your amendment until after we vote on the amendment that's on the floor now. And if you wish, after that vote, to make an additional amendment, you can do that.
That's okay. That's good. Okay.
Any other comments on the amendment, the original amendment? Mark.
Yeah, Mark Koss, 7 Grassy Lane. So I find, quite honestly, this whole conversation quite interesting. So we're trying to dictate to a developer who is trying to put forth a good faith effort to put more senior housing in a town that for every year I've been a part of town meeting has been wanting more senior housing. And yet we're trying to dictate how many trees, how old they are, what flavor they are, maybe they'll be what color the bark is and the leaves. And all of this stuff I think will happen over the right policies and procedures that the various boards are going to get involved with at some point in time. This is a parcel, obviously, that hasn't had a whole lot of demand, or else somebody would have come forward before. And so all of this fits within the rules and regulations of our bylaws, and I think we should allow them to go forward with it, allow some more senior housing, and if you want more trees, then come through the process after we've allowed the overlay district and have a discussion about the trees.
Any other on the amendment? To the right, to my right.
Steve Brierly, Phillips Drive. I love trees. Ask my wife. I hate to cut down anything. But folks, we are getting dangerous into micromanaging this. This is way too premature. This is a site plan. It's an overlay discussion, not a site plan review. Let the planning board work their process when the site plan is done, but don't micromanage the process. I'm against the amendment.
Chairman of the Board of Selectmen.
I move the question on the amendment.
Okay, so is there a second? Okay. This is a vote to end discussion on the amendment requiring a commitment to the planting of a equal or greater amount of trees as are removed from the property. All in favor of ending debate on that amendment, raise your orange cards. Okay, put them down, please. All opposed? The motion to end debate passes with a 2/3 majority, but it's not unanimous. All right. Now we are back to the underlying motion. Oh, sorry. Yes. Now we're voting on the amendment itself, whether or not to require the developer to commit to replacing an equal or greater number of trees as are removed. All in favor of including that amendment, raise your orange cards. Put them down, please. All opposed? I'm sorry, I think we have to count that. Okay, can the tellers come forward, please? Yeah.
Is it got to be 2/3 on
No.
the amendment? I don't think so. I think it was a no, but I'm not sure. We'll see. Let me guess. Last John. It's just a guess. No, I mean, the vote was, if it was a majority. Yeah. Was it 2/3? No. Okay.
Where's Joe? Oh, here he is. Okay.
He's lost some of his workers.
Okay, all those in favor of the amendment, please stand and raise your orange cards. Keep your cards up high over your head, please, while they count. But one fun fact.
Let's see. They believe them.
The town clerk suggests that we sing in round while we're waiting. So while I really think singing is a bad idea, apparently, according to town meeting time, I cannot correct Patty. It says, if a clerk makes a mistake, he or she may correct it at any time before ceasing to be the town clerk, but not after. The moderator cannot help the clerk. He or she can help the, conversely, the clerk cannot correct the moderator's mistake. He or she can help the moderator vastly by a timely nudge or whisper, however. Okay. Please sit. And those who are opposed to the amendment, please raise your orange cards and stand. Stand and raise your orange cards if you're opposed.
I'm going to stand up, but it's good. You can stand. Somebody stole it. They left it at the edge. I could be last year. I said, don't leave it. I did take it. I've lost it.
Keep your hands up. No slacking. Tear your card in half. Okay, can be seated and put your cards down. Okay, the motion fails. 60 in favor, 91 against. So the motion to amend has failed. Now we're back to the main motion. Yep.
Sorry, folks. I just had a question. The senior mod bylaw has certain specific provisions related to the conceptual plan in terms of, site setbacks, survey plan, 5-foot contours, all of that. Were there additional pages, or is this the entirety of what the planning board and the public has related to this plan?
Jeff, can you answer that?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So at high level, the plan that was in the handout for zoning today shows the conceptual plan. I believe there was additional information at higher level of detail as part of the planning board public hearing process. An existing existing conditions plan shown at a different scale, showing contours based upon aerial imagery and GIS.
Okay, and the planning board concurs with that?
Want to give the planning board report again?
So the planning board concluded their public hearing on this proposed amendment on May 24th, 2021, and voted 4-1-0 at their meeting of June 7th to recommend this article to town meeting.
Microphone to my left.
Thank you. Denali Delmar, 8 Dunstable Road. I have a question and then I have a comment. Now, my question is, do I understand correctly that this parcel is currently zoned in a way that would not allow residences to be built?
Jeff?
So it is my understanding, Madam Moderator, that it is possible for single-family development to occur on this property. I believe it's zoned Industrial C, but it does require a special permit first from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And if development were to occur, there'd be a much different density. I think the requirements are for 100,000 square foot per dwelling unit.
Okay, thank you. Did you say you had a comment?
Yes, I do have a comment, as
Okay.
a matter of fact. For a whole slew of reasons, we should defeat this whole project. We do not need more housing as much as we need to deal with our climate crisis. We do not need more houses, we need more trails. Currently, this property has very little value. If they have to have 100,000 square foot per unit, I would very much like to see this just defeated right now. Thank you very much.
And the microphone to my right.
Caroline Fisher, Princeton Way, formerly. Are you telling that when this is, if this is done, that the liability for the quarry sitting in the middle of the whole place devolves to the condo board?
Yes, I think the applicant answered that already. The petitioner answered that. The condo association would be the owner of that quarry and then responsible for its.
Well, I was just asking again because I couldn't believe it. Because I'm guessing the HOA is going to be pretty high for liability insurance. For that.
I'll let the petitioner answer again.
That is correct, that the quarry would be the responsibility of the homeowners association. And just to be clear, this is the second project that's been built with a quarry. Graniteville Woods also has a quarry, and that is the liability for that quarry is held by the homeowners association.
Well, I'll just say that sounds like an accident waiting to happen. And as a senior, I would like to caution all of you non-seniors out there to not view this as senior housing. This is semi-age restricted, multi-$100,000 housing with a couple of units thrown in for people to make it look like they're doing something nice for the town of Westford. Thank you.
To the left.
Terry Stater, Old Colony. I'd like to move the question.
Okay. Is there a second? All right. This is a motion to cut off debate. All in favor of cutting off debate and voting now, raise your orange cards. Okay, put them down, please. All opposed to terminating debate? That passes by a 2/3 majority. All right, so we're now voting on the main motion to create the new senior overlay, or in addition to the senior overlay district, in accordance with all the things that have been presented. If you're in favor of this motion, you'll vote yay, and if not, you'll vote nay. So all in favor, please raise your cards. All right, put them down, please. All opposed?
It's a count.
Yeah, I think we need a count. Sorry. Last one. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, here come our indomitable tellers again, led by super teller Joe Roy. Ready? Warden, sorry, super warden.
Quick point of order. Has it been pointed out that this is a 2/3 vote?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, all in favor of the motion, please raise your orange cards and stand. And stand, please, so the tellers can count you. Please remain standing with your cards in the air.
A big thank you to WestfordCAT for being here with us all day today. All right, put your cards down and sit, please. And all those opposed, please stand and raise your orange cards.
He's sleeping. Okay. All right. Okay.
The motion fails. 79 in favor, 88 against.
Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussions today. I have one more thing informally, not published in your motions booklet. I would like everybody who liked the idea of the food trucks to raise your hand. Should we do it again? Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor? See you in October.